Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The regular meeting of the Roseau Township Planning Commission will come to order. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get into the agenda, I would like to welcome Bill Heil from the Township Board, who is our new liaison to the Planning Commission. Bill, welcome. Would you care to share some thoughts, please?
Thank you. Certainly. I requested to be liaison. I think that there's opportunity with coordinated effort to better advance the goals and the wishes of the citizens and the township itself. There's a lot that goes on here. I have a lot to learn. My first step is probably to be listening and learning so that I can better represent you when I get there. I had a nice conversation with Janelle today. I was asking about this U-Haul item that's on the agenda. And it seemed that the questions I was asking were on target. She answered them beautifully. And I was impressed when I was done with those questions with the care and the thoughtfulness that you put into what you were doing with your thoughts for these people. And that impressed me. And I think that it's my first experience in something that you dealt with. I know it's a small item, but you guys have good heads. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate your comments and welcome and look forward to your input. Okay, let's move to additions or deletions to the agenda. Any changes anybody proposes to make? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Support.
Motion from Koblak, support from Eric. Call to question. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Agenda is approved. Next item is approval of the minutes from the last meeting of December the 2nd. Any comments on those minutes?
Move approval.
Motion to approve from Koblak, support.
Support.
Support from Ranka. Call to question. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Ross, I assume you're our minute taker today?
Nope, that's James Brock, our new hire, putting him on the minutes. So.
Oh, he does it remotely or whatever?
Yep, he tunes in after, watches the recording and types them in.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Very good. Seeing Brittany over here.
I know, right?
Her smiling face. Next item is public comment, an opportunity for citizens to speak with the commission about any item not on the agenda. Any comments? Mr. DeBoucher, welcome. A familiar face.
Hi, everyone. Kyle DeBoucher, 21719 West River. Just wanted to thank Ross. I had come up last meeting to say that the packet wasn't online, and it was. He showed me where it was. But not only was it there, he now also updated it on the Civic web, which was where I was accustomed to seeing it. So it was really good to see the packet online for tonight. I can review it now as a non-commission member, which is really nice. And just, I think you all know this, but after the bridge, I think this master plan that you all are working on is easily the most important thing. And I know that's for a later agenda item. I just wanted to say thank you for your work on it, and I'll continue to be watching it and finding ways to get the public involved too. I know that the public can write in there, but I might try to find ways to get others to comment and interact. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, no additional public comment. Then we'll move to the first action item of the evening, the only action item for the evening. There's a special land use and site plan review for Island Paradise. The applicant are Paul and Susan Dalpiez. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. They are the owners of Island Paradise. This is the dog boarding business at 9510 Groh Road. And this is located along Groh Road in Commerce Park. The proposal is to start a U-Haul truck and trailer rental with outside storage at this existing airport building, which houses the dog boarding business. The zoning is A1, Airport and Light Industrial District, and under A1 standards, a truck trailer rental is a use by right. However, outside storage is not, and it requires a special land use and a site plan review. So tonight, the Planning Commission will review specifically the outside storage elements of this U-Haul truck and trailer rental in the proposal. The relevant ordinances are Article 22, Special Land Use, Article 21, Site Plan Review, and Article 9, A1, Airport and Light Industrial District. Under Article 22, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Township Board. The Township Board makes the final approval. Under the Article 21 Site Plan, the Planning Commission makes the final decision. I expect the Planning Commission will vote on both these items tonight. With that, I will stop, and we will start with the special land use first, move through that, take the vote, and then ask Brian to offer any comments further about the site plan, and then we'll vote on that. Fair enough?
Thank you, as always, Mr. Chair. Wonderful introduction, covering 90% of my material. So, subject site, 9510 Groh Road. This is the existing Island Paradise dog dog daycare and boarding facility. They did obtain approval almost a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, eerily. Very strange. You're going to have to stop doing that, Paul, but that's okay. So it's property just across the street here, north side of Groh, between Midway and Meridian. And as noted, the zoning is zone A1, which is your light industrial airport district. And the proposal is for equipment rental, specifically trucks and trailers. As John noted, the fact that they need outdoor storage is what drives this into the need for special land use and site plan review. So procedurally, John's already hit this, but I may as well cover it since it's on the screen. So we are having a public hearing this evening, and then if you are so inclined as a commission, you're in position to put forth a recommendation to the board on the special use. However, you do have approval authority over the site plan. So again, as John noted, if you are so inclined to put forth actions tonight, the special use will be a recommendation. The site plan will be your own action to make. You do, under the ordinance, also have the authority, if you wish, to postpone action on the site plan until after the board has granted special use approval. So that is something that is always within your purview. However, if you are prepared and ready to move forward, you can act on both tonight. And as John noted, I think that may be where we're headed. But if not, I want to make sure you understand what your options are. And I've already noted that the other business obtained approval last year. So I'm going to cover a few of the materials provided by the petitioner, and then I'll get into some of the ordinance considerations. So this is a view of the site. So this is their front parking lot here. This is the portion of the building that they occupy. And then this sort of middle area here, this area is all fenced in. And then this middle portion will still be dedicated to the dog daycare and boarding component of their business. They will be proposing a small area in the front, which is identified as kind of the smaller vehicle equipment area. So the trailers, the shorter items, would be in this area, but not in the front yard, behind the building, but within the screened-in enclosure. The larger vehicles then would be towards the north. Again, this area is also screened in with fencing, and there's actually some existing pretty dense vegetation on the east side of where the larger vehicles would go at the north end of the lot. And this is sort of a little bit better view of what I just described. So again, this area we have towards the front, fully enclosed with screen fencing. These areas in between are just continuation of the dog daycare and boarding. And then there is the other area to the north. And this is by virtue of the screening that's provided here and the spacing that we have. This is where those larger trucks would go. They are inherently, just given the nature of the site and the size of some of these things, they're going to be generally limited as to how many they can have on site. Because I know that was one of the questions we had early on in the process. The maximum vehicle they would get, we had pegged at a 10-foot tall truck. That's the biggest one they could get. That's not the biggest one U-Haul offers, but that's the biggest one that the petitioner would use on site. And the way your ordinance works with the screening that's provided in relation to the height of what's being stored, the setback is increased. More specifically, we have 6-foot screen fencing to protect views of 10-foot trucks. So what the ordinance allows is it does allow them to exceed the height. However, they have to increase the setback. So this location sort of on the east side of this northernmost lot, that is the only location that they could have the taller vehicles by virtue of the screening that is provided and then the setback that would be required in relation to its height. That's explained in a little more detail in my review letter, but I wanted to point that out because I thought this slide sort of depicted that pretty well. Similarly, so here's just an aerial look. Again, you can see some of the setbacks. You can see the relation of the storage areas to the building. This does show some of that existing vegetation towards the north. There are also deciduous trees that sort of line the outside of the westerly fence area, not providing much screening right now. Come spring, those will certainly add to the visual barrier, at least to help protect some of the views from off-site. And then a couple of photos, again, most of this I've already at least described verbally. I think these pictures probably do an even better job. So this is the northernmost area that I'm circling. I don't know if you can see the cursor, but the left side of the screen, this is the dense evergreen tree row that's here helping to protect. This is the 6-foot screen fencing that's, again, out here to protect. This is towards the Liberty Avenue side, towards the north property line. Same thing, just a little bit different viewpoint in the upper right corner. And then in the lower right, you see that's that front area. So you see the internal fencing with my cursor here. That's that dog daycare area that I showed in the earlier picture. And again, this whole area being enclosed by 6-foot tall screen fencing. So the front is where some of the smaller or lower rise vehicles and equipment would go. And then this is the external view. So again, this is from off-site. So this is from north looking south at the bottom left as well as the upper left. And then this is another view again showing the full extent of that screen fencing. And then these are those deciduous trees that I had mentioned earlier, some of which line the roadway, some of which are within the fence line, some of which are outside the fence line. But when they are in bloom for 3/4, those will just add to the screening that's provided out here. So I've covered, there's really 3 key components to my review under the ordinance. We start with the special land use standards. So section 22.3 of the township zoning ordinance. I did find in my letter, as you can see, you do have, or should have at least, the full report in your agenda packets. Did find that those standards are generally met. I had 2 points that I wanted to bring up for discussion and or potential conditions. The first is one of the standards in 22.3 is related to compatibility of the use with the surrounding area. There are specific requirements applicable to this use in 9.3C, and in order for you all to make a favorable finding on the special use standards, you do need to be satisfied that the standards of 9.3 are also met. So as long as you're satisfied with those findings, then I think you can make clear findings on the special use standards. And then lastly, just kind of a catch-all was related to any additional staff comments that were provided, whether it was from Ross or fire or public safety or anybody else. My understanding at this point in time is we did not receive any concerns from other staff reviews. So I think we're good on that one. Then the second part of the special use gets into the use requirements I mentioned earlier. So 9.3C, specifically paragraph 5, has a host of standards that have to be met. Again, those are related to screening, to location, to setbacks. Did find that those are also generally met. There are, again, 2 comments to that as well. The first is that they are, the petitioner is proposing, let me find the right space to show this. They are proposing short-term use of the front parking lot. So you're not supposed to store any of this equipment in a front yard or utilize required parking spaces. But the way the operation is intended to work is that this would just be for pickups and drop-offs. So if somebody, and the petitioner can probably explain this better than I when he gets his chance, but I'm going to try. when they come to pick it up or to drop it off, if say somebody drops the vehicle off at 11 o'clock at night, there is the chance that the vehicle is going to sit there. But then what the petitioner is offered is that soon as open business the next morning, that vehicle is going back inside the storage yard. So it's not going to be stored there in essence, but it may be used on occasion for short periods of time where people do drop off and pick up the items. So that is one thing. Need to make sure that, my opinion, if commission's going to put forth favorable recommendation tonight, I would like to see this included as a condition such that it requires the petitioner to relocate those vehicles or that equipment as soon as is possible. Whether we get more definitive with that and put a time frame on it, I'm certainly open to discussion on that, but I would like to see something that ties that back such that I don't expect it to, but if it does become an issue or it is a recurring problem, I want to make sure that Ross and his staff have the ability to go back and explain to the petitioner why they're going to have to change their practices or why they're in violation of their special use approval. So that's the one I'd like to see as a condition. And like I said, I can help you with better verbiage than what I just presented. And then the other was a couple of the requirements are related to public safety and access for fire in particular, should there be an issue on site. And Ross did meet with Fire Marshal last week, and the Fire Marshal did not identify any concerns with the business as proposed. So I feel like we've checked that box as well. And Mr. Chair, I know we were going to kind of split it up, but the only site plan comment I had was just making sure the applicant knows that they have to obtain a sign permit before they put up any new signage if they're seeking to put up a sign for the U-Haul component of the business.
Okay, nice and simple. Okay. Questions for Brian? Okay, thank you, Brian. We'll hear from the applicant.
Guys are being too easy.
Mr. Delphine? Okay. Questions for the applicant? Well, I have a couple. Since the dog daycare and boarding is a 7-day-a-week operation, does that mean you'll be renting 7-day-a-week also? The same?
The U-Haul hours are a little different. They're a little more constrained because, we're busy with the dog daycare business in the morning and the afternoons. So it'll be actually a little more constrained.
Like 5 days a week, or?
Right now it's 5 days a week. Yep. Sundays off, but we have Saturday and Wednesdays off too. So really.
So if a trailer was dropped off on Friday night or whatever, the next business day,
I'll be there Saturday. We're there at 6:30 in the morning every morning. So
it would
7
be
days a
moved
week.
next day. So
yeah.
if it's Saturday, it would be Monday.
No, if it's dropped off Saturday, it'll be moved on Sunday.
Oh,
Yeah, because if it's dropped off Saturday night, because we're there 7 days a week for the dogs, so we'll move the vehicles while we're there. Even though the U-Haul operation, the ability to pick up a reservation is limited hours. We'll be there to move to handle the trucks.
so that would work for you, Brian, short-term turnaround, next day removal, if
Yeah.
it's in the front?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so that'll be consistent with your business. Okay. Another question. How about things like refilling gasoline and, there's all,
So there's no maintenance being done on the trucks on the premises other than filling tires, washing windows, cleaning the trucks. There may be an occasional tire repair van pulling in there to replace a tire on a truck that may be bad. Other than that, there's no fuel, there's no oil change, anything of that nature is done. Most of the renters, refill the trucks when they bring them back for gasoline. So
there's a garage somewhere off-site that these?
yeah, they contract. Yep, they contract. U-Haul also has a truck that comes out once every 3 months to just check the trucks, but they don't do oil changes. They don't do it's really just a maintenance review of the trucks. If something's wrong with the truck, actually it's in Romulus. They go off to Romulus to be serviced. So,
A very, very straightforward rental
yep, it's just rental
and in return.
Yep, exactly. You got it. Yep.
Okay. Questions from anybody else? Mr. Rathel?
I have, I guess, a comment. Paul, you've been with us for a year. Is that what Brian just said?
Yep.
You and Sue have been fantastic. And
Thank you.
Janelle's here. What a service you provide with the doggy daycare and now the grooming and services. And I know you guys are busy all the time, and you've added a great value to the airport. You've added even a more important value to the township. And the way that you do business and the way that you will handle your U-Haul business is top-notch. It cannot be any better. You're so caring and concerned about the look that you have and the reputation that you and your wife have in this community. And I just want to thank you for all you do for us.
Well, I appreciate that, and those are kind words, and thank you, John. So,
Additional comments before I go to the public hearing? Okay, on that note, I will formally open the public hearing for the special land use. Anybody wish to comment from the public about this application? Kyle?
Kyle DeBose, while I'm here, I'll just support it. I encourage you all to say yes. Thank you.
Hey, that's short and sweet. Okay, any other comments? Don't see anybody else out there, so entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Rathel, support. Support from Mr. Ranka. Call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
A public hearing is closed. We'll now move to final decision and recommendation on the special land use.
I move approval of the recommendation to the Township Board to approve the special land use for, what are we calling this? Is it something different? Is it Island Paradise? There you go. Island Paradise U-Haul.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Support from Ranka. Friendly comment. Brian asked that we mentioned that it was compatible with 9.3.
This was something that the Commerce Park Commission looked at. We're very conscious of especially outside storage type activities and how compatible they are to where they're at the airport, and we found there was no issue with that. So
Can we put that into motion, that it is compatible,
it is compatible, and
which is why you're making your motion?
right.
Okay.
So, do you need anything from me?
Brian?
No, I think that's
Handles that, right?
that's fine, Mr. Chair. I was only going to suggest if you wanted to just add a finding that the standards of 22.3 are met, that would cover everything.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Does Brian, does the temporary storage or temporary front storage go into use or in the site plan?
My gut is the site plan, but I don't know that it matters. I don't know that there's any harm in including it in either or both, quite frankly.
Okay, then we'll include it along with the sign permit in the second
Perfect.
motion. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion on that? Call the question. All in favor of the recommending to the Township Board the special land use be approved, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carried. Let's move to the site plan now. Entertain a motion regarding the site plan.
Move approval to approve the site plan as submitted with one addition, that the front drop-off and pickup area is a temporary scenario that will be managed appropriately. Is that
Okay, we have a motion. Is there support? Support from?
Brian.
Okay, can we be specific that it'll be moved the next business day? That's
how,
what-
how are we going to police that? I mean, is Ross going to go out there and make sure it's 20? I mean, it's
Not on Saturdays, that's for sure.
I think that the way I said it is how I want to present it. I mean, it's,
Okay, does that meet your standards?
That works for us, yep.
Brian, acceptable?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. And I just had one other point, and I should have mentioned this in the presentation, so I apologize. If you're so inclined, Mr. Rathel, as part of your motion, if you could include another condition that the township board grants the special land use approval to, that way the site plan and special use are tied
absolutely,
together.
I'm okay with that addition.
Okay, so we have that addition. Eric, acceptable?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, then I'll ask for any further discussion. Hearing none, call the question. All in favor of the site plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Brian, will you be preparing a findings of fact for the board?
Yeah, I'll work with Ross, and we'll make sure this gets to the board the next available meeting.
Yeah, Bill, this will be something that you'll be presenting to the township board as part of
Thank
your
you.
role.
I was expecting that. I was going to ask you that question when this was over, so we're in tune.
Yeah, you'll have a good summary to give to the other board members, make it very straightforward for you. You're welcome. Okay, very good. Thank you very much, folks. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a discussion, a continuation of our master plan work, specifically looking at the implementation action plan. A little background first. You guys all know this, but for the public, the Groh Seal Master Plan is the Planning Commission document that serves two purposes. It documents what Groh Seal is today and provides a vision for how our community can grow and evolve in the future. It is the underlying basis for the zoning ordinances, and all zoning ordinance changes that we make must be tied back to the master plan in order to be legal. So it is an important document. The master plan has a lot of different elements to it. The two that we as a planning commission are most focused on are land use and housing. At the November 4th meeting, the Planning Commission approved the draft document to be released for public comment, and that was for a 60 or 65-day period. I don't remember which. 65? Okay. And the public, it's available on the website for the public to offer their comments. The document comes back to the Planning Commission, and we evaluate it and make a final recommendation to the Township Board. And that will likely occur in the first quarter of this year. But again, the Township Board is the final decision maker. It was agreed at the November 4th and December 2nd meetings that the Planning Commission would pay particular attention to the action items in the implementation plan, because these are have Planning Commission responsibility to them, and we want to make sure that we as the Commission are comfortable with the action items as they are written, or whether we need to modify them or delete them or substitute one for another. We want to make sure that what we say is what we think, so that we don't get in a situation where we put something down and then ignore it because we don't agree with it later on down the road. That's not the way this is supposed to work. So we're going to go through these action items, have a discussion about them, and see if we can get a consensus around them. Now, any changes that we would potentially make to these action items would be rolled in eventually into the final document. So, on that note, before we actually get into the specifics, I want to make sure it's clear as to how these action items are actually going to be processed potentially by the township. Again, there are three separate categories of action items. There are what are called near term, which are 0 to 5 years. There's a midterm, which is 5 to 10, and then long term, I believe, is 10 to 20.
Yep.
Okay, and they're broken down in that way, so that the near term ones are the ones that are clearly ones that would be worked on first. Now, beyond that, there is also a listing with each action item of who is the champion. The champion is the group or person or organization that's directly responsible for initiating the action, is responsible for making it happen. And the other groups that are listed underneath that provide support, basically.
Those are the partners you're referring to?
Sorry?
Partners, I think a term for that group?
Not necessarily partners. It just means that in the process of the group that leads the charge on this, they will pull in the other organizations around to provide the input and help them to implement what's needed. So, if the Planning Commission is not listed as the primary, that means that somebody else is, but we then would support that role. Now, the last time we met about this, there was a lot of discussion about the manner in which the wording of these action items was presented, and this was an important point that Jay made about whether when you look at this, say 5 years down the road, whether it reads as an order or a direct call for action, or whether it is written, for example, as a consider, evaluate or consider, okay, which opens it up to being what it should be. You know, you're not making a decision in the master plan. What you're doing is saying, hey, this is an area that maybe we do need to think about, you know, and at that point in time determine whether it's valid or not valid, or whether it needs to be modified. Okay, so that was one of the things that Ross was charged with doing from the last meeting to this meeting, and so he's rewritten a number of these, and you were given, the handout today, or for this meeting, that reflects his work. Now, the other thing that we wanted Ross to do was to take a look at some of the verbiage inside the master plan itself that drives these action items, because there were some concerns expressed about the way things were expressed. Now, Ross and I discussed this, and that to us was a secondary priority to getting these action items clearly defined and reviewed by this commission. And that following that, Ross will then basically go backwards into the master plan to make whatever changes to verbiage that this commission had raised. Which, the changing of an action item may in fact change the verbiage of the document itself that drove it. So that's what has to be kind of linked up and paired up. I think the commission, we should review one more time, Ross, how these action items are actually going to be processed. Would you run through the grant that you got, and how you and Brian and potentially, well, there will be another planner involved,
Correct.
to make things happen. Could you describe that again, please?
Yep. So we do have an additional $35,000 in funds available for future zoning updates. So essentially, once we run through all these action items, once we approve the document, we will then go towards updating zoning ordinances for Macomb Street. And we'll also use funds to update the DDA TIF plan and other things. But these action items will set the precedent for what zoning changes will occur on Macomb Street, and therefore the community down the line. But the single family zoning updates, everything else will come depending on available funding, depending on township capacity. It could be anywhere from 3 to 7 years when we get around to single family zoning districts. Or it could be sooner, depending on, if I get an intern or something like that. But so immediately, once this is adopted, we'll go and update Macomb Street District zoning standards, and then later on, single-family zoning standards.
One of the things that the three of us, you and Brian and I were discussing ahead of time was the fact that there will be another outside consultant.
Correct.
So that you'll go through a process of bidding, I assume?
Yep. We'll send up an RFP and RFQ to reach consultants. We'll have an interview process the same that we did with this consultant for this master plan, and the planning commission can make their decision based off of interviews if they'd like, or whichever direction the commission wishes.
Okay, another one of the things that we discussed offline was, anytime you bring a new consultant in, there's a learning curve. Okay, and how that learning curve is mitigated by the input that you and Brian would provide. And that the planning consultant may not, you guys may in fact, you might write an ordinance change, or Brian may write an ordinance change, because you have the knowledge already to do it, and the simple stuff or the straightforward things, can be worked without this outside consultant on the more complex things. Is that a correct statement?
Correct. Yeah. Things like, maybe like if accessory dwelling units are approved, that's something that Brian can handle. But if it's something like amending our open space development zoning ordinances, that would be something that we would get a contract with the consultant for. So.
Okay, well, that would mirror the way the process has worked for ordinance changes in the past, where the officers get together with the staff, and we basically work out potential changes, and then we present recommendations back to the planning commission. I assume that is the methodology that we would follow. Okay, so that's how we get from what we're looking at here to actually something that is tangible in a zoning ordinance change. Okay, are there questions or comments on that? Does everybody understand how this is going to go?
Yeah, I have a couple, if that's okay.
Please.
Excuse me. The first is I get the sense that there's a fact that I'm missing. So in the past, when we've done things like this, Brian has been our consultant who's done that work. I'm assuming there's a reason why Brian wouldn't be the consultant doing this drafting that we're talking about?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, it's strictly a capacity thing. Each one of these, if you break these down into smaller individual components, that's not an issue. I can handle all of the work. The issue is a bigger budget item, a bigger project, where we're talking about the need to analyze, review, and update, the entire ordinance or numerous sections of the ordinance. That's where unfortunately, I just don't have the staffing capacity to take on a bigger project like that. But smaller bites at the apple, I fully intend, as long as Ross, you all, and the board are comfortable having me continue to do that, I'm happy to do that. And I think the piggyback to that is, because these are ordinance related items, I think that I'll have more of a presence, or I guess more availability, if someone does have to be brought in to take on a bigger role. To assist isn't the right word, but to sort of try to bridge that gap that John alluded to of kind of the learning curve of this community. And I think Ross and I can sort of jointly take on a bigger role with that if some of these tasks do require additional outside help.
Yeah, I recall hearing that now that you clarified it, but it's probably good that we all hear it. Because I was getting the sense like there was some prohibition that you couldn't, in your current role, you couldn't be involved in that. I was like, what in the world are we doing? But okay, that's helpful. And then I just want to, I guess, clarify, and I think it builds on what you said and what Ross is saying, but I just want to clarify, when we talk about, let's say Macomb Street activities, I think most of the items here now say consider, and so what I would assume we would do, and I guess I'm just seeking a nod or, concurrence or explanation if I'm wrong. What we would do is we would sit down and we'd say, okay, one of the things that we're going to consider here for Macomb Street is X, what questions does the commission have about that? What concerns? Is this something we want to work on in the near term, or is this something that needs more study? And if the concurrence, or if the conclusion is that this is something we want to move forward on, then we would have a small group meet, work on, kind of the rough outline of what it is, bring that back to the commission to say, is that what we're looking for? Bring it back, so in other words, the conclusion may be, on the Macomb Street stuff included, yeah, we looked at it all, and right now this doesn't make sense for the township, right? And we will have concluded what we said, what the master plan tells us we were to do. Now,
Right.
I would assume that there will be some changes coming out of it. So I'm not saying, assume that we're going to do nothing. But I just want to make sure we're not committing along the lines of putting the word consider there, that all of the things that are on here are things that we're going to do in the next 1 year, 6 months, or whatever.
Yeah, this is simply, this just says, it just puts it out there. Let's look into this. And then we make our decision, the planning commission makes their decision at a later date. It's just saying, hey, these are the common trends. These are what we heard in the community. Consider this, investigate this. And then you guys say yes or no.
To make sure that we're all on that page. Is it consistent with what you were saying, I think, John? I think that's what you were saying.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to for sure.
Okay.
I think we have to be really realistic about one thing, though, and that's Brian's time. I mean, we've had a list of other small ordinance changes that we wanted to make for the last year, and we have made zero progress. Okay, there simply has not been the opportunity in Brian's schedule to be able to work on these, and I don't really realize that now if a number of these things roll off. They're also small, short-term things. Why are they going to have any better chance of having an opportunity for Brian's time as the ones that we haven't been able to process? I mean, the realistic thing is you are at 100%, or very near it. So I think we need to keep that in mind. I mean, when he comes around here at the township, he is going from the time he shows up to the time he leaves, and with very little stops in between. So we shouldn't necessarily expect that it's going to be easy, because it won't. Did I overstate that, Brian?
No comment. No, I'm going to help out however I can, Mr. Chair. I think that's the bottom line. So,
Okay.
whatever I can do within my capacities, my time, I'm going to do my very best to make sure that you guys get these things done and that you get product that you like, at least in as much as I can control that.
Okay. Then, as far as then getting to the specific action item list, there are a number of ways that we can approach this. We can approach it from the standpoint of everybody's looked at these things and has comments or two about 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. Okay, and we go through them that way, where each commissioner states concerns about an individual item. Another approach is to simply start at the top of the list, read the action items, see if there are any comments, and move through. And if there is discussion, if there is a difference of opinion, then we simply determine what the consensus of the Planning Commission is. I will determine what the consensus of the Planning Commission is regarding changes, and make those changes. We'll direct Ross then to make those changes accordingly. The third approach is one that is less intense for the Planning Commission, but it builds on the way we as a commission have developed ordinances in the past, and Jay alluded to it. The officers get together, we review them, and we make recommendations back to the commission. We think that 1, 5, 10, and 8 need to be modified. Everything else we think is fine. These are the reasons why we think these need to be changed. We give them to the commission, and the commission then says yes or no. So there are 3 different ways of wanting to do this. Recognize that there are approximately 40, 45?
42.
42 individual action items for which the Planning Commission is listed. So I'll defer to the commission. How do you want to approach this? Eric? I'll start with you.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're all going to have to go through every one of these. And I think we do ourselves as the community a disservice if we don't do that.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know if that says we take 2 meetings and we do, our 4 meetings, we do 10 per meeting, or, 20 per meeting and 2 meetings.
I think another thing is you'll find there's about 5 that are hot topics in here.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah. So some of them are, well, that's obvious. It's kind of stating the obvious. And then there's a couple that, you'll find that will generate some discussion. So I think the 42, it seems dooming, but you can get through it.
Well, let's run through and get other people's opinions. Don, what do you think? How would you want to approach this?
I agree with Eric that we should give attention to each one of the items, but also within these items, there's a lot of similarities. I think if we, for example, if we take care of number 3, it might also address items, 6 and 7. There is a lot of similarities. I don't think we need to spend time, a lot of time on every item, but at least read through and see if there is any comments.
Okay. Yeah, if we have opportunities to consolidate, that's direction that Ross can take and skinny down the list. Brian, what do you think?
I'll just echo the commissioners before me. I agree, going one by one.
All right. Bill, you all right with that?
Frankly, I'm not sure. I think we're trying to determine priorities among the action items. One way would be to cluster. My thought listening to that was that we might each have a list and put a numeric sequence to them, where they couple up, have like 1, 5, and 20 or something, and we'd see how they cluster. There might be a discovery in that process of a consensus on what our priorities are to a degree. If we after we decided how they were grouped, which were the more important ones to address first.
Well, I think
Which would also leave, I'm sorry, some of these small items that never get attended to might still be off the shelf because something seems more important, or just the reverse. We don't know until we put the information together to review.
Well, I think we can accomplish what you're talking about if we look at the individual items that are on here, focus on the near term, which is the grouping that you're talking about, and then roll in, what Don is talking about, where we have similarities to consolidate, so that we end up in the list with a grouping that you're talking about that does represent the first priorities for the community. That's what I think I'm hearing. Am I correct?
Yes, and I think you said it better than I did, but that was what I was reaching toward, something in that vein.
Okay. Jay?
Yeah, I think, I go with whatever everybody, I think that, most of my concerns are really bigger picture, to consider language, to make sure that we're not railroaded into decisions that we're not prepared to make without consideration. So I'd be interested to see how quickly we go through those, as long as everybody understands that that's the nature of it. Are we willing to look at it, or are we not willing to look at it, I think, is the question in my mind on these things. And so
In other words, if there are things there that we just wouldn't consider, I mean.
yes, that's right. Like, we don't even want to have that on the list of things that we're willing to consider, because somebody's going to point to it later and say, you should have considered this more, something like that. I mean,
Okay.
That's kind of my main point, which means I think we ought to spend some time with it. It's probably not tonight, but talking about the language maybe in the priorities page at the beginning of what was in our packet, to kind of clarify the consider language.
To say what that specifically means.
That somebody doesn't come along later and say, you were supposed to have done all these things. And we say, we did, we considered, and they say, well, that's not what that means. And so,
Actually, that's a very good point. Ross, that's something for you should consider, you should consider to what that means.
A lot of consideration into this, and I mean,
you get the point.
I think that's sort of it's this plan it can only be implemented based off of township capacity funding and community based off of community needs. So it's all, it's considered at each step, like while considering all three of those sort of things. So I think that no matter what, whether whether at one point in time, at year 3, we considered it, we said no, and then 10 years ago, they come back and they say, oh, well, they considered this, and they said no, well, let's reconsider. Or this is a near-term, action item. They didn't do it in 0 to 5 years. Well, we're 15 years from now. Let's pick that back up. It's all. This is just a guide. It's not like we're legally beholden to implement or every single action item in here. It's just. That's why people typically say plans sit on a shelf and don't get implemented. We're not the township won't go to court or if we don't implement this plan. But of course, we're going through this process to implement this plan. So as long as I'm here, I'll be implementing this plan. But you can always consider. You don't have to put up a bunch of signs up front saying.
I remember from the 2002 master plan, the action items there were not really so much considered. They were specific. And
Right.
This commission went through those. And we went right down the list, and implemented, and looking back on it, we did a tremendous amount of work to make that master plan a reality in the zoning ordinance. And,
Yep.
and so, that's got to be our expectation here as well.
Right.
Mr. Rathel.
I certainly agree with my fellow commissioners that we all need to look at this, right? And we need to read each one and understand them. I disagree, though, that I think I just did some quick math. I think if we spent, each commissioner commented 3 minutes on each one of these, it would be about a half hour, right? And if we took all 42 of them, we're looking at about 18 hours of comments to go through these. It's not doable. It's not based in reality as I see it. If there's consolidations that have to happen, or there's things that are more important, I would rather have the executive committee meet, go through this, look at it, you see what needs to be consolidated. Certainly ask for input from each commissioner, and I think it's our obligation to communicate with you of what our thoughts are, and then come back to us with what is the most important. We all kind of express our feelings in these things. We know what each one of us feels about different things. And then just bring back, the action items that you feel that we need to act on, and then we can talk about it at that point. But I think just going through this list and commenting, even if some of them are way out, there's still going to be comments. We're not going to get 8 or 9, no comment, no comment, no comment. There's going to be people are going to have opinion when they're asked about each one of these. So I'd rather have you guys meet. We'll give you our thoughts on the ones that we feel are important to us. You guys compile it, combine it, consolidate it as you see fit, and then bring it back, and then let's tackle it at that point.
Okay, we have a different approach. Thank you, John. Let's see how this goes. Angela, what's your thoughts on this? There's obviously divergent opinions.
Yeah, so I didn't do the math on the time. I guess my suggestion, if we're going to go through it one by one, would not be that we each go down the line on each objective. I've read through the plan a few times and the implementation, the suggested actions. I don't know, maybe I'm bored at home, but I've done this a couple of times looking through them, just to kind of look for consolidations. It doesn't scare me with the idea of saying given consideration or consider, or, the language that we have in here. I think it breaks it out to a manageable conversation over the next several years. And I personally, given the fact that we hired these consultants, they came in, they took 18 months in the process to formulate the suggested actions. I would hesitate to remove too many of them, just given the fact that they're looking at trends and kind of where we've been, where other communities have been, and how they've moved forward, and maybe where we'd want to consider moving forward. And it might not seem important to us today, but if we're not all in these seats in the next 5 to 7 years, it might be something that's considered important. So I would just look at it from that viewpoint. I promise, in the sake of efficiency, not to have an opinion on all of them.
Yeah, okay.
Swear. I said I've looked through it a couple times.
Yeah, right.
So that's my thought.
I think Mr. Ratho may hold you to that.
Yeah.
Might.
Okay, Mr. Kobolak.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are different opinions how to proceed. I think if you think about the way this was first drafted, consider wasn't even a part of it, right? I think you sat down with the chair and there was some, contemplate, consider. So you can see, you're right, there are some hot button items that are here. The fact that they were phrased the way they were, probably if they weren't phrased that way to begin with, they wouldn't have been hot topic items. But at the same time, what John's saying actually has some relevance when it comes to the way things have been done in the past, and John, you alluded to it. I have no problem starting at the top and knocking them all off one by one. At the same time, if there's a deadline and the decision or consensus of this commission is that we provide our commentary on the ones that stand out. Let's say Angela goes, there's really just one that I don't think it's not presented the way I'd like to see it presented. She makes reference to one. She submits it to the executive board, and they look at Angela's comments and they use that as that part of the discussion when they get to that item. You probably can knock this out faster than the 9 of us. So either way is fine with me. I mean, we can start at the very top and go one by one. Or we could all have a deadline, say by the 15th of January, we give you our comments, you guys sit down, you go through them, you come back to us, and now instead of looking at, whatever you said, 42 of them, we're looking at 8. And then we knock that 8 out in that hour so that John's calculator doesn't overload with timing of how long it's going to take us to discuss them. So either way, I think it's going to work. We have to address it one way or the other to give direction to Ross and get this thing going to the next step. So either way is fine.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. How about, since we have different approaches that we can take that both have all have merit. Let's start at the top of the list and let's go through 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these things and let's see what happens. Okay, and if from a time perspective, Angela is right and nobody has any opinions, okay, and we move through those 5, then that tells us that we can probably continue. On the other hand, if we get to 5 and it's at midnight, we'll conclude we need a plan B. Will that work? Give it a try?
Give it a try.
All right, so Ross, we're going to start at number 1 and work our way through. I'd like you to read it, summarize it, and then we talk.
Sure.
And I'm not going to go individually to, persons who have comments on this, either plus or minus, is for you to just pipe up and say them, please.
Yeah, I'd say we consider one page at a time, not each. Have Ross read each one of these. Let's just take 5 minutes, do each page. If there's a, say H15 I've got an issue with, let's talk about H15. And if there's no issues, we keep on going.
Do you have an issue with H15?
I might.
How long do you have?
Right. All right, so start at 1, go to H15. Am I starting at the top?
Start at the top, read it, and we'll move on.
So objective H1, expand housing choices to make Roseville Township a desirable place to reside for a wide range of age groups. Action 1, consider potential adjustments to zoning codes to allow for more flexibility in housing development while maintaining our community's unique identity. Number 2, consider conducting a comparative analysis of zoning application, processing, and steps of Groh compared with other communities to identify additional potential financial barriers to development that could be streamlined.
How does that, how would that be interpreted if Wyandotte, if we charge $1,000 for a site plan and Wyandotte is 500, does that mean we would change to 500? I mean, your cost structure, the amounts that's charged is based on the cost structure of the community, isn't it?
Correct. And I think that what this is saying is, what triggers special land use, those sorts of things, like evaluating how, what special land use requirements in Wyandotte, Trenton, what have you, is triggered compared to Groh Zeal. And, I adjust my fee schedule. I think that includes it too, but I adjust my fee schedule every year, so.
Yeah, but your fee schedule is also based upon your budget as well, right? So again, Wyandotte's budget for their development might be completely different than Groh Zeal's.
Right.
So I've always been a little confused how we want to compare ourselves to other communities, just
Yeah.
because you're unique in your own way, how you run your department, how you go through the application process, how the planner's paid for. I mean, it's different than most. I mean, he's not in-house, he's out-house as a consultant,
Right.
right? I mean, you don't live in an outhouse. I say you're out-house, Brian. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that there's inventive ways that you can adjust your fee schedule. I mean, not to get too deep into this, but I mean, you could base your fee schedule off the cost of construction. I mean, that's how a lot of communities do
Correct.
it. But we
Correct.
don't, and that could be something that we could investigate. I think that's looking at those sorts of things.
Yeah, I would add, I mean, building on, I think what Ross is saying, it's worth looking around and seeing what others are doing, and if, somebody's got a better way to do it that, and I guess what I'm concerned about is if there are things that we require that aren't adding any value to the process, it's not prohibiting some mistake that's going to, damage the township or something like that, and it's just an extra bunch of hoops that people have to jump through to develop something, we ought to reevaluate that and eliminate it. And if the fee structure should be adjusted, maybe not shrunk, but just adjusted in how we do it, then I think that's the sort of thing where we can look around and see if is there something there, and if there isn't, then we don't make any changes.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I really apologize. And I know we're on objective 1 and we're going through these action items, but I mean, did we all agree that this objective, on this objective, and I guess when I look at it, we want to make Groh Zeal desirable to a wider, I don't have my glasses, but range of age groups. What does that mean? I mean, I mean, how do we do ordinances to attract different age groups? I mean, is there a 30-year-old need different ordinances than a 40-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 60-year-old, or what? When we look at age, I mean, what does age have to do with our ordinances? I mean, and I guess we're going through these action items to accomplish an objective that I don't have a real clear understanding of what that objective means. I mean, are we looking at it as an economic issue that we think younger people don't have the money and older people do, and we want to make ordinances that attract younger people that don't have the economic availability? I don't know what that means, and I have a hard time going through each one of these action items to achieve that objective.
I think this plan is to, it's providing flexible housing standards that are welcoming to both younger folks and for older folks. We spoke a bit about this at the last meeting. We'd like to have flexible housing standards for potentially an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard for, my 80-year-old, grandfather to come stay with me, where that's not allowed right now. And providing flexible housing standards in single-family zoning districts where to have, smaller homes on smaller lots. I mean, we spoke at length about that at our last meeting.
Yeah, I know, but I don't ever remember that we came to an agreement that, we want this objective. We want to have these myriad of housing opportunities for a diversity of age. I know we talked about it. I know we said, okay, well, you will look at, R1E overlay and, you know, how do you, you know, do that and, you know,
Right.
what, but I don't, unless I was not,
I mean, it was through public input. It was through, tons of like the research, the data collection, trends, everything that goes into a master plan, right? All the background information, everything that created this document. That this is the recommendation that was made from the consultants, and a year long of work is.
well, it's my understanding that the residents came out strongly that they didn't really want a lot of changes in our resident development, that they like it the way it is.
Gotcha.
And I'm not saying I'm in favor of making some changes, right? I mean, it's, but
Now for a thought here.
Please.
Instead of using age, throw out the concept of stage of life. And then what you're doing is building something to help people progress through it. When you're doing this for the community, it's more likely that if you're 25 or 30 that you're going to have young children, so maybe you have more interest in a playground, you see. And at that stage of life, because you have commitments to shoes and everything, you're not having more disposable income. So you might want a home that's a little more small. But as you progress through life, things change. And then later on, when the children are raised and you might have some disposable income, you'd be interested in a home by a boat dock, you see. And if we're looking at it that way, what we're doing is trying to meet the needs of people as they progress through life. And that might be another way to make some cohesiveness out of it.
That's a great point, Bill. I know that one term I've heard is the age in place. So again, like you don't have to leave a community because like you want a different type of housing. You can stay in your community and be a part of it. You just might move from one location to another within your community. And so it's all about housing choice and making sure there's a variety of options for people regardless of their age or regardless of like their their status and things, that there's a place for everyone within our community.
And I guess through the chair, and I guess just going back to what John said, and I know others might disagree, but that ability to do that on Groh Seal is available. I think what John's asking, John Rathel, the question is, if you take a look at the premise of Objective H1, who has agreed to that premise? And if we've agreed to it, or the planner's proposing it to be part of the master plan, and then eventually the township board through the planning commission will adopt it, I guess that's the way it's done, I guess. But I think the questions asked is, when you see expanding housing choices to make Groh Seal Township a desirable place to reside for a wide range of age groups, have we agreed to that? Because if we have, then when you take a look, and I'm jumping ahead, John Schweikert, I apologize, but if you go to number 3, consider revising the zoning ordinances to smaller homes on smaller lots. Well, if we agree to what's in orange, then I guess we can address number 3, because that would make it available to all age groups, right? Smaller lots, smaller homes. So I think what John Rathel is asking is probably something that we should just address and knock it out, because it does kind of create a situation where 1 through 7 the premise has to be right so that we can answer 1 through 7, right? And if we've agreed to it, then we've agreed to it and we move on. If we haven't, then I guess that's another issue.
Perhaps we should consider, let's reword Objective H1 consistent with kind of the general language that the J uses with consider. But for example, rather than simply expand housing choices, maintain or expand. Maintain and or expand housing choices on Groh Seal to meet residents' needs, and just take the age and the issue of stage of life out of it to meet our citizens' needs, and that covers everybody. Now that is the kind of a statement I think that we could agree to.
Yeah.
I would agree to that.
Future residents,
Yeah.
something like that. Yep, absolutely.
And that way, again, it's not a lock-in. Ross, can you kind of read that back or whatever, and let's see if we can get agreement on that.
Maintain and or expand. This keyboard is not the best.
I don't think we're seeing that, are we?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, it's so small, I can't. Blow that up at all?
Yeah, let me see what I can do here
That's
for
like
you.
font 2.
That's much better.
Oh, thank
Maintain, maintain and or expand housing choices to make Groseal Township a desirable place to reside for current and future residents.
Well, you don't need to reside for residents. Desirable place. Maintain and or expand housing choices to make Groseal Township a desirable place to live for current and future residents.
I'm happy with
Now,
that.
is that statement, Kurt, from your point of view, generic enough?
I think we just wanted to address the premise, make sure that we all agreed on the premise. Then 1 through 7 make a little bit more sense in context.
Okay. So does that language work for everybody? Head nods? Okay. Great point, John.
Back to number 3.
All right, so let's go back. Okay, with that in mind, let's look at number 1 again and run through it again.
Consider potential adjustments to zoning codes to allow for more flexibility in housing development while maintaining our community's unique identity.
Zoning codes to allow for more flexibility in housing development while maintaining our community's unique identity. Okay, and that has you basically listed as the community development department listed as the primary lead on that. So what that means is that the consultant potentially, or you and Brian, would come back with proposals.
Correct.
Okay.
Consider conducting a comparative analysis of the zoning application processing and steps of Groseal compared with other communities to identify additional potential financial barriers to development that could be streamlined.
I think you should change that to non-value added. Take out this business about barriers to development. What we're looking for is non-value added cost, non-value added steps. That's what Jay's point was. It has nothing to do with the cost structure.
Just say barriers. Just take out financial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it isn't even barrier. It's non-value added steps is what it is.
Well, I think
The barrier, right?
I think
Yeah.
I think
doesn't-
they could be barriers. It could deter people if it takes a long time or if they feel like there's a lot of steps that they have to go through that are not value added. Then they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah,
And-
processes could be consolidated or switched around, other ways to be able to get through the process quicker without actually sacrificing any, anything that we would want to be commenting on, reviewing.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I think I have a problem with it in general. So when you look at, steps of Groseal compared to other communities to identify additional potential financial barriers, well, Groseal has financial barriers compared to other communities around us because we're more expensive. Our housing is more valuable. It's a better place to live in a lot of regards as other communities, which is why we're here. So I don't really understand why we want to kind of make ourselves comparable to other communities and then adjust whatever the definition of a barrier is to allow somebody to come here that
All this is
Make a proposal.
Please.
Just because we're talking about comparing ourselves to other communities, let's not confine ourselves to always think about the communities that are just on the other side of the bridge or just near us. There are plenty of people who consider Groseal who are also looking at Commerce, who are looking at Northville, who are looking at Saline, plenty of people. So that, in my mind, is the consideration, or Grosse Pointe or whatever. So I wouldn't say let's always look at the ones right around us, but I do think we need to compare ourselves, because if it's harder to develop here, then they'll go elsewhere.
Well, I think that, geography is going to prevent a lot of people from moving there if they need to live here. So, I guess in all my years, I've never thought, okay, well, we need to manage our business the way Northville does, or Plymouth, or Commerce, or anywhere else out there, because we need, we are in competition with them for residents. I mean,
You ever look at other airports to see what other airports are doing and how to improve this one?
I think that you look from a standpoint of what specific positions are paying, and what value specific things on an airport is. But each airport is unique, and we are very unique here, and our cost structure is totally different. And I wouldn't say that we go and say, okay, we're competing against Toledo Airport, so let's so.
I wouldn't say competing, though. I think you're looking at it from like a competitive standpoint. I think it's just more about, are there better ways to do things that we can benchmark and continue to make to stay relevant. It's not about competing necessarily. I'm not taking that as I'm looking at it as impediments to people being able to do the development that we might desire here, or they might desire in the future. I'm not necessarily thinking that it's competing. I'm thinking it's just benchmarking. Just like,
well, I think number one, when you look at the flexibility in housing development while maintaining community's unique identity, I think that kind of covers that, right? I mean,
Well, and actually, through the chair, and John, you're right. Number one's kind of a general overview, right? I mean, that's really what you want. And when I spoke last time about the way that these things are spun, you can take number two, and again, you can see that we're now working on 1, 2, and 3 almost concurrently, and then back up and down the list. You could actually just say, consider conducting a comparative analysis of the zoning application process and steps of Grosse Hill compared with other communities to streamline development, right? You could make it a positive spin, right? You could do it that way. What happened with this, and again, this is just my own personal opinion, and I apologize, but the way this was done by the consultant, it was some of these are spun in the negative, and I don't know why. There's no reason to say that it's a financial barrier for development. What I'd rather you say, and for Ross's purpose, for the Community Development Office, you want to go out, like Jay said, to look at the other communities, to figure out what they're doing well and potentially implement it. And we might be doing some things that are really well that we're not going to change. That's a positive number two. It doesn't need to say to identify additional potential financial barriers to development. It just doesn't.
I mean, I think that
why it says that?
I get your understanding. I think that's what I picked up from this original draft. That we just need to compare ourselves and see if there's better ways to.
Then let's just say that.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't say that. I don't know why the planner originally put in financial barriers to development. There's no need to say it, because I think what they're trying to say is, let's make ourselves better than everybody else. So what we're doing really well, we keep. The things that we should change, we change.
Right, so
and
let's
I
rewrite
think
this
that your example of the airport, and what we go out, I mean, you're always going out to look and see if there's, a better way of doing something. But, I don't want to start, like Kurt said, negative, that, we have financial barriers here.
Just the language, additional potential barriers, that implies that that the barriers are already there. And we're
Right.
Okay, that's a negative.
I mean, to me, this is the boilerplate language. You're putting this in every one. And to me, I don't even know why this is in here. Do we have problems with our application fees? We're cost-based, we're covering our costs.
Yeah, nope.
Do we have outrageous steps you have to go through to develop, to go through our process? I mean, if that's an issue, then we would put that in here. If not, then I think we just X this thing out and move on. We don't need to. You see it every day, right? I mean,
I don't think there's an issue having something in here. I think what it says specifically, again, this is up to you all, but I don't think there's an issue with whether it's an ongoing it should be probably an ongoing item first and foremost, not necessarily a near term. This is something you should be doing over the course of time, if not annually, you know, every handful of years. To me, it just says evaluate your development and review process and make
Right.
sure things are working smoothly. Review the applications, most of which Ross has already updated. That may need to be updated again in a few years. That's why I think it's more of an ongoing approach, but I think it could be simplified, and that's what it meant to me anyway.
Yeah.
I don't,
I just, by simply reading it, says, let's look at how we are, our development process. I didn't emote any negativity for me, but
So I'll give an example. An applicant who's been before us on the same project multiple times was talking to me, and he was saying, you guys have so many crazy requirements, you know, that make no sense, and no other community makes us go through these hoops and all that sort of thing. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I don't know what those things are. What are they? He didn't articulate anything. But I'd be interested in, you know, I don't know how much time it would take, you know, look and say, okay, are there things that Trenton doesn't require, Wine doesn't require, Canton, Northville, you know, pick whatever, whoever you think are the best in class, right? That's what I would, you know, it could be somewhere in Idaho, as far as I'm concerned, right? Anybody who we think is best in class at maintaining community standards without unnecessary hoops, right? What are those things? Are there things that we could adopt if we feel like we've got this right? We've got the right balance between requirements and protection of our community, then we don't do anything. But we have gone through the exercise of determining whether we think that's the case. So that was, when I read it, that's what I read this to mean, and I said, yeah, I mean, with the word consider, right? Noting that we're going to look at it, and we may come back saying, no, there's nothing to change here. But, you know, it'd be something we'd check off, saying, no, we went through that, and there's nothing that we think we should change.
Well, okay, there's barriers to what? Barriers to development, okay? How about barriers to having a better community? I mean, when you change ordinances, you're impacting both. So again, if we're looking for best in class, then that's what we should be saying. We should want best in class. We should want best in class for our procedures, for our financial, and for our end result for our community. And why can't we do that? Define best in class applications that we can potentially use. So consider conducting a comparative analysis of zoning applications, processing, and steps of Gross Seal and adjacent communities to achieve that goal. I mean, that's wordsmithing, but
I like what Jay just said. Can we just, the note taker, can we go back and just have them write that?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that can be the draft. I mean, it's in, in a positive spirit. It's in the right vein of exercise of auditing
we're seeking best in class. So let's agree that you're gonna rewrite this to make it consistent with that positive spin. That is a goal we should have. We should try to be best in class always. And it has nothing to do specifically with development. It's with everything in our zoning ordinance and our processes for the community and for developers.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we're all saying the same thing.
Right.
I mean, we're all saying the same thing, okay? And I think for Kurt and for me and well, I'll just speak for me. When we look at, like, the financial barriers, okay, do we have financial barriers? You know what, I think that it's good of the township, community development, and your department to always find out what other communities are charging for permits and what their structures are, and say, you know what, yeah, this community only charges $50, we charge $100, that's where we want to be, okay? Is that $100, is that a financial barrier to somebody that wants to move over here? So, well, you guys said, we got to eliminate financial barriers. They can get it done $50 over there, so now we're at 50. So see how
well, just like tonight, we had a special land use case, correct? We, under the fee schedule and passed by the township board 2 years ago when I came here, the community development director is able to, flux, charges for special land use. That's what we did for this applicant tonight, because this is his second time going through it. But for an individual who, any other individual potentially wouldn't be able to have that same, be afforded that same opportunity, maybe that second go around of special land use isn't needed for something like having a U-Haul. And so maybe we can look into, that's what it's saying. Like, do we really need to have a triggered special land use for an additional U-Haul service at Groh Road? That's all it's saying. It's just because it's outdoor storage as opposed to indoor storage.
Right.
Maybe, if it's outdoor storage, they won't have to go to special land use to
Right.
seek
I
approval.
only have a
That's all it
problem with,
is.
I'm going to stop talking about this. I only have a problem with additional financial barriers.
Yep, and financial. has
Okay,
no rules.
financial barriers means that we are willing to reduce our financial requirements to something else based upon whatever someone's opinion is other communities do. And I'm not sure that we have financial barriers. You know what, we have development, we have movement, we have things. Now, do we want to change lot sizes and make things more compatible for other types of building opportunities? Absolutely. I mean, you know what, absolutely, all right? But, does that mean that we lower our financial requirements to do it? I'm not in favor of that. So I agree with what you're trying to do, but I'm not in agreement with the financial, of conceding that we have financial barriers here. I'd argue that our costs are too low.
Mr. Chair, it sounded like we had some good ideas on like how to wordsmith this to like meet most people's needs, including the ideas about streamlining and best in class. So, if there's if you so may, do you think we could just kind of wordsmith that so that way maybe we can move along to other action items?
Ross, come back with a proposal. Jay, do you write up something over here?
I did. I'm not sure I mean, tried to capture what I think everybody agreed to. Just started lining out, starting with additional potential financial barriers to development, lined all the rest of that out, and then replaced it with best-in-class requirements and other procedures.
Very simple.
I have highlighted here, Jay. Delete that.
Other communities to identify best-in-class requirements and other procedures. I'm not sure that's artful, but, and then delete the rest of it.
Mr. Chair, could I just offer up a tiny suggestion, not to step on Jay's toes? I would suggest, instead of best in class, like best practices, best management practices. That's kind of more terminology that would be consistent with, I think, what we're talking about. Best in class, it works. I mean, I think generally we have an understanding of what that means or what that's intended, but for the way this works within the planning and zoning realm, that's kind of terminology that we would use more frequently, would be, best management practices, best practices.
Okay, let's put that in there. Agreed?
That's okay with me. I mean,
Okay, can we agree that this is number 2? All right, we've agreed. Number 3.
Right.
I have a comment on number 3. Oh, I'm sorry. You can read it first.
Consider revising the zoning ordinance to allow smaller homes on smaller lots.
For item 3, in order to address item 3, you have to address item 8. And my thought would be to combine those and turn it to one. Item 8 pertains to R1E overlay district, so we can't create smaller properties unless we eliminate R1E or modify R1E.
Right.
So they're interrelated. And it's one item that we've talked about several times, and I don't see a problem with considering it again.
So then number 8 states, proactively assess how the R1E overlay can be refined to enhance the island's resilience while simultaneously supporting appropriate development opportunities.
I think they have some really broad terminology there, but I think the main thing is, more importantly, I think is reducing the size.
Right, yeah, I think if you were to, hypothetically speaking, this is not what I'm saying, if we were to remove the R1E overlay, let's just say, you would have, we're also considering creating maybe potentially other districts and looking at like a PUD, for instance, right? With smaller lots, smaller homes, something like that. So I think that, removing the or assessing the R1A, R1E overlay is actually somewhat separate than what number 3 states, but I could be wrong.
Well, I think number 3 is at a minimum dependent on 8.
Right.
Right. If we don't do anything with 8, then 3 becomes somewhat
Right.
dead letter. No, I see what you're saying is right. We could address R1E, but that doesn't necessarily take care of 3.
Right.
But 8 is required for us to take care of 3
Right.
if we wanted to do something there. I did have the thought on 8, since we're talking about it, that instead of assess how, but assess whether, it can be refined to enhance the resilience. I don't know if that makes sense to people. Again, just not wanting to assume that we're going to figure out how to do it. We're going to figure out whether we should.
Point.
Mr. Chair, I'm not understanding why 8 and 3 are independent of each other, going either way. Certainly understand if we don't address R1E, number 3 will never achieve its objective, right? However, if we say, okay, number 3 is good, but then we change or eliminate A, then that's not good either. So it's the only way that we are going to have an ordinance change to allow smaller homes on smaller lots is to eliminate or modify R1E.
Unless, could you do so through a planned unit development?
Yeah, I mean, you guys.
The PUD, if you could
had
do
that
it, you could
tool.
develop a PUD and forego the R1E overlay, right? Or no?
I mean, you'd still have to do. There. I guess there's a number of ways I guess
Right.
you could handle that. I mean, you could combine these two. I mean, you could consider revising the ordinance to allow smaller homes on smaller lots and further evaluate or whatever the language was about R1E.
But Brian, let me ask you a question. If we just strike 3 altogether and then just work on number 8, doesn't that accomplish the same thing?
That would simply take you back to the current base zoning. I think the intent of this was to evaluate the other existing districts for minimum lot and minimum home size, as well as potentially create a new district that would hit a gap of whatever it might be in terms of home size and or lot size.
Can you give an example of that? I'm not.
So R1B is the predominant zoning classification. R1B is a 16,000 square foot lot area minimum. So I think the idea here is to evaluate whether that should change or whether that could be reduced, or the gap from R1A to R1B is a 30,000 square foot lot to a 16,000 square foot lot. Now R1D, kind of, even though it's out of sequence, kind of hits the in-between there. So, whether your existing should be evaluated for potential changes or whether there's a new district to hit another number, I think those are different options. And then I also think that the home size could also be a separate matter. I mean, right now you have, each district has a minimum, usable square footage that you have to build in order to develop in that district. And that doesn't necessarily, you could change that without changing the lot sizes. I guess you wouldn't have to do both per se. I think there's a few different components to this. I'm just trying to think of a way to simplify it. I don't know if I'm doing that.
Well, I don't know if I'd be in favor of taking those examples that you have and basically cutting almost in half the square footage requirements, and then,
That's why the word consider is important.
Mr. Chair?
Exactly.
I mean, but why do we want to consider that? I mean, I mean, do we want to consider that? I don't want to consider it.
I think revising it to allow a smaller home within an existing district, I think in reality, there'd be very few instances of that happening, as opposed to R1E applies to new properties through the entire island.
Exactly.
You know, I think I think it'd be tough to find examples of doing that. Also, I think, a PUD is a great example too. Maybe we should consider putting that in one of these items so people understand ways of actually accomplishing this.
I think there is something in here that says and consider bringing about the PUD. So I mean that's sort of the combination of smaller homes, smaller lots, and the PUD. So I mean that's why I think they are separate, but that's.
Well, there's
Mr.
no
Chair?
guarantee that a smaller lot gives you a smaller home.
Well, I think like having different requirements.
But we specify a minimum. We don't specify a maximum.
Right.
Or
But I think what's our minimum
outside of Bigfoot, you're right.
square foot requirements?
Again, it varies with the district, but the example being R1A is a 1,500 square foot home minimum, R1B is a 1,200 square foot home minimum, R1D and R1E are the largest at 1,800 square foot minimums.
They're very
Let's
close.
let's kind of be realistic about this. Are we really going to create a new zoning district with a smaller lot size on Groh Seal at this point that's 90% built out? To my thinking, no. If there are tracts of land where there is going to be an opportunity to take advantage of PUD, well, in fact, doesn't the R1E standard allow for compression of homes onto a smaller area? Which is exactly what a PUD
Yeah,
is.
under open space, but it would obviously greatly impact the number of units that you could get still.
It impacts the number that ultimately is built, but
Correct.
it allows the compression
Correct.
of homes on a smaller portion of the lot size. That's the whole West Shore Golf Course proposal. They had a big tract of land. They calculated the number of homes they could put on there and then compressed them into potentially 20% or 25% of the property. That's exactly what a PUD does.
Right, but our requirements are 50%.
I don't remember the percentages.
Yeah. But it's like looking at something like that, like the requirements for our.
Then I think we should say that rather. This implies to me that we're going to come out here and create an R1G that's 50. Or we're going to reverse the language of R1B and allow all the 50-foot lots on this island to be developed as 50-foot lots. Is anybody up here willing to do that? If we're not, then we shouldn't say this.
What if we consider revising the zoning ordinance to allow smaller homes on lots?
So can I ask a question then about just to refer back to the PUD? So do we need to look at revising the zoning in order to consider the PUD that's outlined in 10 and permit mixed use and the density? Like, I think in some way, shape, or form, we need to look at that in order to. I'm thinking about Macomb Street as an example, or other areas. I think we need to take those steps in order to give it consideration, right? Or am I not thinking about that correctly?
I'm not following that. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read through this. That wasn't you. It's not the way you explained it. I didn't catch all of that. I'm still looking to. Is there a recommendation to establish a PUD in here?
In 10.
I haven't gotten there yet.
It's in 10, at least at that. I mean, it might be elsewhere also, but
Consider creating a mixed residential zoning district or PUD option to provide flexibility for a variety of housing types through rezoning.
But this is only the whole number 10 is applicable to. Well, I guess it's
Macomb
such
Street and
as
Yeah, which makes sense.
Macomb
there,
Street and
right?
Commerce
Macomb Street and
Park.
Right. I mean, we have to make those changes there, right?
Right.
I really think, in my opinion, that 10 should be more independent and maybe strike out such as, because I don't think there's anywhere else we're considering doing these type of items other than Macomb Street area, because we've had this discussion several times.
Well, it does say Commerce Park in there, so that would be a different one.
Yeah, but
I know that
if someone feels that we're going to build houses in Commerce Park where you can't own the property, I mean, there's 0 there now. I don't think that's,
Yeah, I do know a trustee as well that talked about like the redevelopment of the Water's Edge complex in the future to be more of a different type of district, to say the least. So again, like keeping it as such as allows for other districts in the future. Not saying that they're going to happen, or it's not there's nothing definite, but it allows for that flexibility in the future if something does come up.
And there is that, just as an example, I think there was some consideration for that Sacred Heart property and things that aren't yet identified that might come available. I don't know, we don't address that specifically in 10, but just to consider. And then in terms of Commerce Park, not having homes on Commerce Park necessarily, but adjacent to, like the Meridian property, could be a possibility.
Right.
I mean, that just keeps it open. I would be in favor of just expanding, like reviewing the language to make sure number 10, there's so much there. The number 10 gives consideration to that whole idea of appealing to, smaller footprints, but, maybe in specific areas, maybe not overall.
Take out 3 altogether.
Okay, we're going from 10 to 3 to B
Yeah,
to
well,
C.
we're in the same,
so,
we're in the same thing, right? So we're trying to accomplish what number 3 is in other areas.
take out 3.
I would say just take out 3 altogether, and then, look at R1E, which I'm in favor of looking at and changing and possibly even eliminating to achieve some of these things that we talk about, in different areas.
Could we move number 3 under 10 as a sub-bullet, just in a general,
I don't like that language at all, considered.
Yeah. Sorry.
Keep in mind that 10 is only for Macomb Street. And if we move it under there, then, we're making the decision that those are the only places we consider.
Yeah.
Probably is.
No, that's valid,
Let's
yeah.
be honest, probably not gonna put it in.
Right.
Well, but we
Right.
talked about, this goes back to my point, right? And we talked about, the option of putting in denser housing next to the Catholic Church. Right. I'm not sure there's support for that on this commission at this point. But it's not like it's not something that will be raised or considered. Right? So I think, taking the time to put it on the list, go through the options, weigh the consequences, put it before the whole commission, take a vote, and move on, or, move on it, or. Sorry, wasn't on my mic. For all those of you watching at home, I apologize. So, I just think, I am concerned. I don't think there's a ton of support for allowing smaller homes on smaller lots other than, in very limited ways. But, I'm not sure in the process of drafting the master plan is the time to determine whether or not it should be something we consider or not.
But I think, Jay,
restrictions on it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I think you can strike 3 and still accomplish what you want with 8 and 10, and I think it doesn't limit or exhaust the ability to consider it. I just think number 3 seems very, again, it's like 30,000 feet. It's just like 1. It's a broad comment, not a specific comment. And I think that the plan, if you take a look at 8 addresses it in clear, specific language. We're going to look at R1E to see how we can enhance. Again, some of that language is unique, but
I would argue 8's pretty broad too. I mean,
Well,
these
eight's-
are intentionally meant to be broad so that we can investigate it at a later date.
yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like there was a variety of alternatives that could be in place in order to, create those smaller homes on smaller lots. So
But
I see like where you're coming with that. And I think like, maybe just saying, consider alternative revisions to the zoning ordinance to allow for smaller houses on smaller lots, including, and you could say like, including PUD and, the R1E overlay. Do something like that where you're saying this is the goal, this is what we're trying to do, which is what we're considering, and there's multiple ways to accomplish it. And so you just give some preface to like different ways you can do it, but it's not exhaustive, and it leaves it open if there's a eureka moment and we figure out the perfect alternative.
I'm just
Well, there's also an implied assumption here, this is all single-family residential. And a way to
Right.
get smaller homes on smaller lots is to rezone as R2, multifamily. I mean, that's the most practical short-term option, is to rezone. So, I agree. I think this should be, this is too generic and should be taken out.
Mr. Chair, you just said that there's different alternatives, including rezoning. So, like, if the goal is to have smaller homes on smaller lots, it seems like that would still, you want to keep that there, but just expand it to say that there's different alternatives to do it.
Well, I would say that our goal is not to have smaller homes on smaller lots. Define that.
I think we discuss smaller homes and smaller lots in much more detail in item 10.
But item 10 is specifically for those special districts.
Well, it says, again, it was previously brought, it says such as, that was brought up earlier. It's,
Yeah,
so it's
I
not
think,
specific.
I think we're reading into that. It just says such as. I don't think this is specifically for Macomb and Commerce Park.
I know there was talk about removing the such as and just leaving it as Macomb Street District, so just want to make sure.
No, there's a whole other section on Macomb Street District. I don't think this could be anywhere, right?
Well, I mean, as you move down the list, yeah, I mean,
It just says close to activity centers.
right. So yeah, that could be schools, that could be,
Not so easy, is it?
Well, my timer's
Yeah.
going, and
Your timer-
we're a lot more than 3 minutes on each one. So I've recalculated, my 18 hours originally was estimated as now 26 hours to go through all these.
I wonder, do you think we can get
honestly
breakfast
feel-
delivered?
But you said we're gonna go until midnight, so we got 3 more hours almost, so.
No, we're not. I'm looking to end this at 9 o'clock.
I think this is probably the most contentious issue probably that we would have. This has had a lot of conversation already in past meetings, so I don't think that this should be the judge of everything coming after it.
Okay, I'm not certain we've got a consensus around 3 or 10 at this point. I want to basically stop this at this point and come back to the generic question. Okay, we've just spent an hour and a half mulling over 2.5 items, basically. All right, now, is this practical to continue, or do we go to the approach of at least having the officers?
You know what,
work on
Mr.
this?
Chair, I originally said that we should just give it to you 3 and then you come back with, but I'm having so much fun doing it this way. I think that we need to keep going.
I'm in agreement with John.
I'm more falling in the John's camp where he said everyone needs to look at this, digest it, and provide input to a smaller committee. Because we're not going to sit up here and everyone's going to want to wordsmith it their way, and it's just going to take a lot of time.
Absolutely.
But everyone should at least provide comments on the one that they feel strongly about to the commission or to the whatever group it is. If it's the executive committee that's going to do it, that's fine.
You're part of it, buddy.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
So either way, I'm stuck here. So
I will say, these action items have been, you guys have had these action items for 3 months now, and I haven't heard anything. So please send, so that we can, so that these, these meetings when we get together all at once, where we can really, instead of mulling these things out, live, which, it's good to see, right? We're working together, we're putting our heads together and figuring this out. But I think it would be helpful if we really, bring those comments together, at least submit your comments, and then we can work on it through the subcommittee. So please, actually.
Okay, well then let's take this approach. Eric, you and Jay and I, are you willing to spend time to be able to work on this?
Nothing more.
Nothing more?
Thank you,
You love
Jay.
nothing more. Okay. Then what we're going to focus on, we're going to focus on the first items and see if we can get through this. We need for each commissioner to look at these items, okay? And if you've got wordsmith details, type them out. Can this be sent so that they can actually wordsmith it themselves? Give us a Word document that you can type into. You can say, or this is great, or this is terrible, or put a big X through it. Otherwise, if you think that it's really off mark, and get those to us, because again, listen to the type of comments we've got. Okay, 9 different people, and in many cases 9 different opinions on things, and we need that input as the executive committee to be able to process it, to come back with something that approaches a consensus for the group. So.
Do you have this in a Word doc? Because I would suggest, like, the PDF you can edit, you can add comments and things like that. That's what I've done. I've done.
Or you can even physically write on the document that you have now and scan it in, or just drop it off in my office. But I can also send out a Word document. So.
Okay, if you could send this out. You remember what I did to it when I processed this? I took out the columns for all the other stuff except what were the key objectives. I took the timing out, I took the responsibilities out, and I made it in a format that you could look at, you could read, and it was a very much shortened, much easily readable version that somebody could then, in the Word format, type in exactly what they think ought to be there and use the edit tool so that we can see what changes you're proposing. Now, can you do that for them? Let's give the people only what they need in order to give it the max, make it as easy as possible to get the kind of input that we need.
So you want me to just each action item? And
Exactly.
Just
The objective and the action item. Forget about the tools. Forget about the champions and partners. That's irrelevant. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Just send this with track changes on it. Send it as is. It's already a Word document. Just put track changes on it.
Mr. Chair, I would add that I don't think that the champions and partners are irrelevant. I think that in some cases we might need to add some, or like it might be, we might find something, well, hey, we don't think that fits for that specific group. So I think it's still beneficial to have that, but I do understand what you're saying, that the primary focus should be on the specific language of the action.
I would assume when we would bring this back to the table, if there are comments beyond that somebody wants to add the tools, or they want to add the partners, or the champion, you want to make changes there, that's easy. Okay, that's something at a meeting we can accomplish in John's 3 minutes. Okay.
I don't know about that.
Which now has become our standard. 3 minutes per person. However, get it in a format that we can.
I'll send this in a Word
send it
document
this way.
tomorrow.
Do it. Okay.
Yep.
Guys, work on it.
So let's finish it though, right? So you're gonna send it to all of us.
Correct.
We've got a time limit.
Deadline is when? When does the subcommittee, actually, it's not so much the Ross, it's the subcommittee. When do you plan to meet? When do you want to meet?
So Brian's in. I'm assuming we would like to have Brian there, right? So I think he's coming in the 15th, but I think that we can move to the 29th. And then that would give us enough time to workshop everything on the 20th, unless we think that we can get comments in by the 15th. That's up to the commission.
29th.
So then the 29th, we'll hone everything in. The subcommittee will work everything out, and we can have a meeting on February 3rd.
Fast. More like it.
First and third, correct?
Yep. Now we'll try. We'll do this. You gentlemen work. So this has to be either a Zoom meeting, or it has to be, after business hours. Is that something that you guys are okay with? Eric? Jay?
Yeah.
After 5 p.m.?
Yep, I can do that, or I can do Zoom.
Okay.
9th?
Yes.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yep. I think maybe for the rest of the commissioners, though, I mean, if we need to give you all enough time and I think a deadline to get the comments to Ross.
That's
so
what I
they can
thought
be
that-
compiled.
I thought that's what the 29th was,
Okay.
but I might be wrong.
Are you getting together on the 29th?
Well, we get together on the 29th. I'm sorry. So everything by the 22nd at the latest.
Sure. Let's pick it.
22nd's fine.
Just for clarification, not pertaining to schedule, when all 9 of us develop comments, who's evaluating? I'm just wasn't clear. Who's evaluating all these comments?
Three of us.
Yeah. So I'll condense everything to a single document and provide it to them, and then we'll go through each action item, kind of look what everyone said for that specific action item, depend whether or not we amend it, and then
We will try to smooth out
If there's,
differences.
yeah, if there's vast differences, then we have.
Then if
we'll
we
flag
can't
them as
pursue it
such.
out, then that comes back to the commission.
Okay.
If we can't wordsmith a few words here and there to meet the intent of the consensus of the group, then it's beyond us and it's gotta come back. And there may be, I think, as you said, Ross, 5 or 6 or 7 of those things which likely are gonna come that way. But where we can resolve it, if the executive committee can knock out 50% of them, then that's a huge step forward. And that's what we'll at least try to do. Reasonable goal?
Yeah, if everyone's saying the same thing, paraphrase differently, it's easy. We'll just have to flag the ones that are.
Right,
that
right.
are opposed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so, on that note, let's just stop this discussion at this point. We're not gonna it's been added 2 hours, that's enough. But I would like to have public comment, on this item, before we leave it.
Mr. Chair, before we do that, sorry, I do have just a couple questions, and they're
Sure, go ahead,
procedural
sorry.
questions, right? So, we touched on it before, is that, the wording, is this, if we say ensure that this happens, for example, or some strong action item, and then no one does it, right? Like one of these says, hold developer conferences, right? That never happens, and do we get sued because some developer said, hey, I wanted to do this and you never contacted me? It's a concern, right?
yeah, that's Brian.
No, I don't foresee anything like that. Again, this is a 20-year plan.
Well, yes, but there's a timetable here that says there's near, far, and midterm, and there's timeframes for near, far, and midterm. So if we're supposed to hold a developer conference in the near term and 5 years go by and we don't do it, then are we neglectful?
You can't get sued for violating your plan. That doesn't. I don't see any negative
Okay, then-
consequences. But if there's concerns, you could soften that language again and evaluate and consider, till you're blue in the face. So
that was one concern. The other one is in the champion partners, right? So these are all township entities for the most part, but say DDA, right? So we're basically, by putting this action, we're now committing DDA to doing this,
Right.
right? So is there some concern we need to?
I went through
Worry
all
about.
these action items. Anything that had the DDA and Planning Commission together, I walked through each item with the DDA, and they signed off and approved on every single one of them. So
Okay. That was the main concern, right? Because a lot of this is internal government stuff, but DDA was a specific one, but BPAC was another one, and then community development is your office, right?
right, yep. And then BPAC did the same thing, correct? Yep. And
Correct.
They approved on everything.
Okay, any more questions for Ross or for
I-
Brian before we go to the public?
Yeah, I have one comment. I'm not sure who said it. I think Dan, about the Commerce Park and about its ability to develop residential. I'm not sure who said that down there, but I would want us to consider these ordinance recommendations to include the Commerce Park, because we never know what's going to happen, right? So if we just have everything that we feel from a developmental standpoint of residential and have the Commerce Park included in that, then later on, we don't have to come back and add things and do things, right? So don't dismiss the Commerce Park development, because we did that on our Commerce Park plan as well, and we made sure that we put it in our master plan, right?
Yeah, no, it was that action, that number 10 action item that said, near activity centers, walkable neighborhoods, that sort of deal.
Right.
Is Commerce Park, it's just, I guess, what's allowed there besides industrial?
Well, everything that's, what are we, R1B, right? Is that what we're, development, what is it?
No, I don't think you can have housing and it's like,
Oh,
ends. Oh, yeah.
No, we can.
Because it seems like odd, because right now it's all industrial, the whole residential aspect with next to industrial. Seems like an odd typically you separate it. There has to be a division at some point, you change the residential, but.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly where within the 640 acres you put potential residential, is going to depend on where the commercial existing or future development of commercial would be, right? So.
Yeah, I just didn't have a zoning map in front of me, so I wasn't sure. I was wondering if somebody, knows offhand if there's any residential in Commerce Park.
There is not residential in Commerce Park.
Yeah.
But what we did is in the plan,
House.
in the plan, we have the property that's owned by the township, but it's Commerce Park, the land just south of Meridian School, that is in our plan, thought of as potential future development of maybe residential, right? Whether that happens and whether, we don't know, Dan, but.
Okay,
it's
I was just wondering if it had to be if it had to be rezoned, in order.
Right now, it doesn't have to be rezoned as far as I know. I mean,
Just the amending A1.
Yeah, I mean, there is no rezone. I mean, we follow the same zoning residential as what the rest of the community does, but if we want to put multifamily type units, we would have to address that, in the way that we would have to in other areas of the township.
But to John's, example, it's like if we put this in the master plan and include the airport district, and we do decide to rezone it in the future, you have a paper trail showing that, hey, this was an option that was available. At the time, we weren't ready to rezone that, but the opportunity has arisen now. And so now, your rezoning is more defendable.
Yeah, and the goal is that, okay, we need to have some different types of residential for different stages of people's lives, which somebody said down there really nicely. Well, we need land to do that, right? So, you look at opportunities that exist. We're not going to be ever selling open space, right? We're not going to go into that inventory. So we have limited options of what larger parcels of land available to do some type of development like that. And maybe one day that could be part of the northern section of the Commerce Park, right?
So wait, are you saying you're in favor of number 3 now? Is that what
Yeah, that's what. That's
here we
what's
go.
From one meeting to another. It's a flip flop. It's
Very good.
Took the words out of my mouth, Angela.
You got your
Yes,
John.
yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the question? Okay, public comment. Kyle, you've been patiently listening out there to us.
No, I'll say I think tonight was a good meeting. I know you only got not even 3, but it was a very learned discussion. I think the thing that I would say, just from the outside, the more I think you all focus on language, I think the clearer it is for someone like me on the outside or in the public to see what you're saying.
Your microphone on.
Sorry, to repeat what I was saying. From the outside, what I was going to say is the more that you all focus on specific language suggestions, the easier it is, at least for me on the outside, to see what you all are getting at. And sometimes you'll say something, I'll be like, that sounds totally off the wall, but then you make a language suggestion, and I'm like, hey, that sounds right to me. So I just wanted to encourage the committee to focus on that. It sounds like you have a plan to do that through the chairs. And then I also just wanted to point out something I'm seeing from the outside is there's different types of decision making. As a commission, when you vote on something, it's a majority that makes a decision. Right now, it feels like you all are trying to come to a consensus on everything, which is really hard with you all, being different individuals. So what I would recommend is where it says consider, if there are one or two commissioners that want to consider that item, I'd say keep it in. I'd strongly suggest against taking things out. Remember, this thing's supposed to last 20 years, and so having that in there as an option, I don't think hurts, especially if it just says consider. It doesn't obligate you to anything. So I will say I do favor considering smaller lots and smaller houses. I'm not saying 500 square, I'm not saying 500 square foot mini homes, but I am saying, hey, we do have some of the bigger lot sizes and bigger houses minimums in not just the area, but the state. And so even a few 100 feet difference makes a difference for someone able to build something or do something. The other thing I'd say that I don't know if it's clear to the public, but I think a lot of you know, being on the planning commission, is these don't describe our existing housing stock. Most of our existing housing stock is pre-existing, non-conforming. So, I would strongly consider taking a look at that as to when you're looking at those minimum lot sizes. So anyway, that's just something I would say from the outside. But overall, I thought it was a good meeting. I'll continue to be here. I like to be here, and like I said, just trying to think of ways to bring the public in. And I know there are opportunities for the public to weigh in and write that out. I will say it is kind of hard to ask someone to print out a whole document and write that all out. So I'm going to try to figure out other ways to do that. But overall, just appreciate the work you all are putting into this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any final comments? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.